And welcome to Lucky Day 13. My name is Julia Still, the creator and host, and we are doing all things strategy, leadership and change this evening, three of my favorite topics back to back. It was almost like I planned it. Tonight we are kicking off with my wonderful friend, Louisa Coppel. For people who were at VID19, Louisa is one of the people I was at dinner with when I had the ideas. So she is a wonderful friend. But more importantly, she is passionate about working on things that make a difference in people, in organisations and the wider community. She's a strategist of choice for many public sector and not-for-profit organisations which value her ability to cut through internal clutter, challenge cloudy thinking and draw clarity out of confusion. Her work includes strategic and business planning that delivers results, organisational and programme reviews, and communications and marketing strategy. And tonight she's going to convince us about why strategy matters and how not to hate strategic planning. So Louisa, thank you so much for joining us at VID21 this year. I can't wait to see where we go.
Thank you so much, Julia, and it's fantastic to be here and to see a few people joining us. It's always one of those things with an online conference that it's not like standing on a stage at a conference where you can peek out and see who's in the audience. You actually have to kind of just hope that someone will show up. So thanks for being here. I've been so thrilled watching some of the other VID talks, trying not to get into comparisonitis, never a useful thing, but also so many really fascinating topics and takes on things. So nice to be part of it. A few years ago, I was sitting by a lake on New Year's Eve in Gippsland, in Victoria, which is one of my favourite places in the world, and with a group of friends, and there was bioluminescence in the water, and we just watched the fireworks across the lake in Paynesville. And my friend Phil asked us, "What's your 5-year plan?" And it was a question that took me a little bit by surprise because I'd never thought about having a plan for myself. But the more we talked, the more I realised he wasn't talking about a documented plan. He was asking what was our strategy. He was asking us to think about what future did we want? What decisions were we making to get there? Where did we want to go with our lives? What did that future look like? Were we going to just drift along and see what happened, or were we going to shape our futures? What was our strategy for our lives? And strategy is what this talk is all about. What is strategy, why it matters, and how you actually can use a planning process to define a strategy. And that planning process is a means to an end, not an end in itself, because I actually think that, as I said in my spiel for the talk, a lot of people hate strategic planning. And I think I know why, but I'm going to ask you a few things about that too. So what strategy is not? Strategy isn't templates and frameworks. Strategy is not business planning and budgets. Strategy is not initiatives and actions. It's not a process. It's not strategic planning. And it's not a strategic plan. They're all useful things and they have their place, but they aren't strategy. So what is strategy then? I did a bit of digging in preparation for this talk into some of the leading thinkers and about strategy, and I thought I'd share a few examples about their take and then give you mine. Strategy as strategic planning, I think one of the earliest writings on this was from the ancient Chinese military general Sun Tzu, and he wrote The Art of War 2,500 years ago. And in that he said, strategy without tactics is the slowest route to victory. Tactics without strategy is the noise before defeat. I reckon Sun Tzu might have been writing one of the first strategic plans. And there are a heap of other texts and articles on which sum up strategy as tools and frameworks and plans. And you see a lot of writing on things like the McKinsey 9-box model and the BCG matrix and value chain analysis and other things. And in my mind, they're not strategy, they're tools to help you get to strategy. We also see strategy written up about as competitive advantage. Michael Porter, who created the 5 forces model, which is an analytic framework for actually assessing your competition, really focuses these days on, still focuses on competition, but he argues that all strategies end up being one of 2 things. He says they're either do what everyone else is doing and compete on price and efficiency, or do something no one else can do and get a jump on the competition. So, for example, in the first case, disruptor aggregators like Airbnb and Uber are doing what everyone else is doing in transport and accommodation, but they're doing it incredibly efficiently with a really big profit margin for them. Roger Martin looks at strategy through the lens of the customer, and he thinks that there are 2 choices that influence the success or determine the success of a strategy: the where to play decision and the how to win decision. And his focus is very much firmly on the customer, and thinking about his where to play is which customers are you targeting, and his how to win is about creating a compelling value proposition for them. Hands up if you have an iPhone. Yep, a few people. Do you love it? Are you really loyal to iPhone? Yeah, I reckon that Apple's strategy is very much customer focused. It's about brilliant design and delighting the customer with a fantastic user experience. They're very much thinking in that space of how can we do this and do this beautifully. In Martin's strategy, the company that classically got the how to win strategy wrong was Kodak. And it's one that we actually hear about a lot. Their strategy was incredibly successful for most of the 20th century. They were the leading dominant company in the photography and videography field. And their strategy was what we call the blades and razors strategy. So the idea of that is that you sell your product, the razor, cheaply and affordably for the customer and at a low margin for your company. And then you sell the commodities that go with it, the blades, at a much higher margin. Printers are another great example of the blades and razors strategy. HP and Epson make more money out of the consumables for printers over the life of the device than the printer that you buy from them. With Kodak, they stayed in their lane, they did what they were doing, they ignored the changes that were going on, and other companies got the jump on them with digital technology. Kodak refused to get into that sphere, and by the time they woke up to that world, all of the other companies were really well established. And in 2012, Kodak went bankrupt. The irony of all of this is that the creator of the original Kodak, the original digital camera, was a guy called Roger Sasson, who was actually an engineer at Kodak. And he showed his invention to the bosses at Kodak, and they went, nah, we're not going there. Unbelievable. My take on strategy is that it's about working out what really matters and making decisions about where and how you're going to get there. What really matters and where and how you're going to get there. If you're a commercial company, your what really matters may well be profit, shareholder value, and that's the impact that you're seeking. If you're a not-for-profit, what really matters might be the difference you're making for the community that you serve. In a team, it might be how do you actually get to, what really matters might be how do you get to high performing to help drive the company's strategy forward. And as an individual, it might be about what's most important, what really matters in my life, and what do I need to do to get there. So, what happens if we don't work out what really matters and we don't make a decision? This is a little model that I play with when I'm working with organisations about, with this matrix being do what matters, and in this one being do everything. And here it's decision or indecision, not making a decision. And when we're trying to do everything and we don't make any decisions, we can end up feeling a bit like this card. We can end up feeling fractured, fractious. Staff engagement drops. It's hard to know what impact, if any, we're having. And we're not really clear on our purpose and we have no strategy, basically. I once worked with an organisation where when I interviewed the board before their strategy day, what became really clear was that they all thought they were there for a different reason. They couldn't work out what animal they were. They hadn't made a decision about what mattered, and they hadn't actually thought about how to actually, therefore, they couldn't even think about how to get there because they didn't know what happened. And what it meant was that their very small professional staff were kind of scrambling around and confused and unsure about what was going on. Things just didn't connect. Sometimes, though, organisations make decisions, but they're still doing everything. Their decision is, we've got to keep on doing everything. We can't actually make it, we don't stop anything, we just do everything. And where it leaves us is feeling frazzled. And frazzled isn't a very fun place to be. We're running around in a state of crazy. We're really, really, really busy, but we're unsure really about any impact. We can't measure the difference that we're making. And my classic example of this was I was asked to review a program for an organisation. It was about 18 months old, the program. They'd received significant money from government to get young people out in nature and engaged to nature. And they were doing all kinds of things. They were creating online games. They made a mascot, guy in a suit. They had a song. They had holiday programs, you name it, they were doing it. And the staff were really excited all of the time, but kind of confused. And when I asked them what they'd achieved, that what they told me was what they'd done, not what they'd achieved. And what became clear was that they were actually trying to do a program that worked for 3-year-olds and 15-year-olds. And anyone who knows kids knows that what works for a 3-year-old is not going to work for a 15-year-old. And so we spent a bit of time working together and really narrowing it down, and they carved that age range to something more appropriate. I would say that online games, when you're trying to get kids into nature, seemed like a slightly odd choice to have made. But all of that work that they did meant that they really narrowed their focus. It was like a microscope, making everything very clear. And that program 10 years later is kicking goals. It's been refunded every 4 years with more money. Attendance is growing. The results are really good, all of the evaluation measures, and they know why they're doing it. They know what matters. Up in this quadrant, we're fuzzy. We've decided what matters, but we haven't made any decisions. Leadership hasn't actually articulated their decision. The communications are confused. And the end result of this is quite a lot of confusion amongst people. It's all a bit vague, and people are kind of trying to work out how what they do matches to what the organisation is trying to actually achieve, but they're not really clear and they can't make their work connect. So there is a strategy, but yeah, fuzzy. And of course, where we want to be is up here. We want to be focused. And when we're focused, we know what matters and we're going after it with single-minded purpose. I worked with a health association in New South Wales a few years ago, and we worked together and crafted what I think was a pretty robust strategy. They made a decision that they were going to focus on customer and on creating fantastic educational programs for their members. Their education programs had been a bit hit and miss before. Their strategic plan was only 2 pages, back and front. I'm actually a really big fan of a short plan. And they had their plan, they worked I can see there's lots of chat going on, and I don't know how to chat and read it at the same time, so I'll catch up. When I came back 2 years later, they asked me to come back and do a review of progress on the plan and work with their board and their leadership team on that. And in that short time, they had transformed. Membership had grown, profits were up, the education programs were absolutely kicking goals, and they were actually, their results back, their feedback from their members was that they actually really saw the value in being a member. And so their retention levels were up as well. And as we were reflecting on what they'd done, we actually, one of the board members said to the CEO, so why is it working so well? Why are we doing so well? And the CEO sat there and paused for a moment, and he said, it's pretty simple, really. We worked out our strategy. We created an implementable plan. It was measurable. We went out and did it, and we can tell you the difference. That's how simple it was. And I think it was really powerful for that board, because some of them had been on that board for many years and had never really nailed that sense of purpose clearly, and what would actually success would look like. So we've talked about strategy, about what it is and what it isn't. And we've looked at why it matters and why making a decision and choosing the most important thing is that decision that you need to make and to go for it. But as I promised at the start, I wanted to talk about strategic planning and about why people hate it and how you can not hate it. I don't know about you, but I hear lots of people hate strategic planning. I was at a party once in Newcastle and bopping away for a friend's birthday, and I was bopping away on the dance floor with a whole lot of strangers, and as they do, someone said to me, what do you do? And I said, I'm a strategist. I work with organisations to define strategy and help them work out how to implement it. And she went, oh, God. Does that mean you run those strategic planning workshops? And I said, yeah, I do. And she went, I hate them. They're dreary, they're tiresome. Every time something like that drops into my diary, I just think, ugh. I was at a party. I decided it wasn't my job that night to try to convince her it could be otherwise, but it did make me think about why people hate strategic planning. And have you ever had that sinking feeling when a planning day drops into your diary? I'd love you to join the chat and to actually start to pop in there and say what it is that you think people hate or you hate about strategic planning. I love planning days, says Mel. Yeah, uncertainty. Karina, I'm interested in the creativity. Is that a fear or an excitement? It depends on who runs it. Yeah, that's true. It can be fabulous. Yeah, I love that, Wayne, getting everybody on the same page before the process starts. Yeah. I reckon some of the things that I hear about things that people hate is the idea that there's going to be, it gets hijacked by someone with an agenda, that it might be spreadsheet central or death by PowerPoint, that there's a lot of blah, blah, blah and not a lot of decision making, tedious templates, lots of jargon. Wordsmithing is a killer for a lot of people. A lot of people really hate that wordsmithing sense. Yeah, that's a good one, Julia. The strategy's already been decided by someone and it's actually a communication workshop. So really what they're trying to do is actually inform, not consult. Having the wrong people in the room. Yeah, that's really good. The crowdsourcing is great. People that wordsmith against each other. Absolutely, Elizabeth, that drives you crazy. I reckon one of the reasons people hate them is that any workshop where you just come in cold and there's no priming actually means that, and no preparation, means that you exactly what people have said here is that people come in cold, they don't know what to expect, they're not quite sure who's this facilitator who's doing it, or, oh my God, the COO's facilitating, that someone's going to sit there and put up a whole lot of data and it's not going to mean much. And what does it mean to, what's in it for me comes out. And I think that there are ways we can work to avert those feelings and to help people actually have a great experience in the room and to actually get to a decision point. And I thought I'd share my process. And whether you do this process with an external facilitator like me and others who are clearly here, or whether you do it in-house, doesn't actually matter. The process actually works both ways. I'm just going to get my other sheet down. So my first step before anyone sits down in a room together is what I call discovery. And discovery is where we bilaterally go out and search out what the evidence is in the organisation and find out what people's experiences and ideas are. So we search out evidence and experiences, and it helps us build a bit of a current state of the organisation. I interview board members and leaders individually to get a sense of their thoughts, and it draws on the institutional knowledge of the organisation, and it also helps those people who might sit in a workshop and be a bit hesitant to challenge any groupthink. And that's a really important part to me, is you actually want the diverse views. You want to hear what the dissonance is and the disconnects are before you're actually in there, because you can plan for that when you actually get to the workshop. And the other thing that those individual conversations allow is that it primes people to think strategically. It gets them thinking about the important stuff before they're actually sitting in a room. And that's actually a really useful process. The other part of discovery is evidence and doing a bit of a dive into the data. I quite often hear from people when I say we need to do that, oh, we don't have the budget to do research, we don't have anything. But every organisation is full of data, as our lives are full of data, and it's a matter of working out what it is. So whether it's exit surveys from staff, whether it's customer feedback, there might be financial data that you want to look at, there might be performance metrics if they have them, and so on. There's all kinds of things, and you drill into that to actually see again if what people are telling you is also what's really happening. My team and I did a people strategy for a large not-for-profit organisation a couple of years ago, and in our initial briefing, the HR team said to us, you know, we don't have a retention issue. We have great retention. The average length of service for people in this organisation is 7.5 years. Retention's not a problem. But when we dived into the data, we found that yes, indeed, there was 7.5 years average retention, but that figure masked something else that was really happening. And what was really happening was that anytime they brought on new hires, 2 out of 3 were leaving within 12 months. Now, that's a massive problem for any organisation. Forget just the cost of recruiting and the time on hiring managers and people, HR people, but also the loss of institutional knowledge. Presumably people leaving within 12 months are also not very happy. So it's actually bad for brand. We didn't know why, but it was a really important thing to discover before we actually got to the next phase. And the other thing about that was that we didn't know whether it was a recruitment issue. We didn't know whether it was an onboarding issue. We didn't know whether it was a manager capability issue or a culture issue or a combination of the above. But it started us off in a really, really good, good information that helped us actually start doing the next stage. And the next stage is direction setting. And this is where we get people in the room together, and it is where we start to use some templates and some matrices and some frameworks and some models. But it's also where we start by reflecting back the current state analysis. Now, I don't do that as a death by PowerPoint or a death by spreadsheet. way. I try to keep it tight and neat, but I invite people to challenge my observations and how I've actually analysed it and say where they think I've got it wrong or where I've missed something. But it also shortcuts that dreary part of a workshop where you spend a whole lot of time looking back. It actually makes it nice and tight. You don't have to do a SWOT analysis because it's done for you in a sense, but through that discovery period. And it means they're not spending their valuable time together looking behind them. They're able to actually move into a forward-looking state really quickly. And in that forward-looking state, one of my favourite exercises is scenario planning, and it's where we choose, you can have any number of scenarios, but the basic model is that you jump forward 10 years and you have one scenario where the future is incredibly bright. Everything's going well and we're kicking goals. And you have one which is status quo, the middle one, which is status quo. We've kept on doing what we've always been doing, aka Kodak. And one where something dreadful has happened. There might be a financial disaster, there might be a major competition clash, there might be a scandal, but everything's imploding. And in those scenarios, we ask ourselves three important things. One is, what does this future look like? So we describe that future, we describe its shape. We asked what we did or did not do to get there. And we think about what might be happening around us that might have actually also influenced that state. And what that does is it actually helps you really narrow in on what matters. It's one of those really useful exercises. I think it's probably not one that I could repeat with an organisation, because once you've done it, unless there's massive changes, global pandemics might be a massive change, it helps you really narrow in on that what really matters question. And a really useful part of doing it is that what you find is that if you keep doing the same thing over and over, you don't stay the same. The status quo isn't the status quo, you go backwards. And that's actually helpful for an executive to understand. From that decision-making phase, we make decisions. We nail what that strategy is. We get that, and someone, who was it? Someone fantastic made a comment about a really, clear strategy statement. This is where we actually get that decision about what is it that we're going to focus on. It helps us get that narrow focus, and it might take a bit of iteration. You don't necessarily get it in that first workshop. You might sometimes have to work it through, but people are with you, people are on board with it because they've actually done the work. And the final phase is definition. And there is no wordsmithing before this phase. We don't start using weasel words like enable and empower before this phase. We don't try to craft goal statements before this phase. We're very focused on decisions, not that. So when we're not, I'm ignoring that. I had my phone on silent so that if my tech dropped out for some reason, Julia could reach me. But of course, now somebody else is ringing and I'm going to ignore it. So this is a wordsmithing moment. Definition is how we actually get that plan, ideally a short plan, not a 20-page plan. And we generally find that it's actually much easier at that point because people have been on this journey, they've made those decisions, they're clear about direction, and it's founded on good evidence and experience. So people are actually clear about where it is. And I'd also say that this whole cycle is fun. People find it fun because they're not being asked to do some of that sort of tedious work. They're actually doing thinking work, and exploring work, which most people actually really enjoy. It's also a way in which we can get our stakeholders and our shareholders on board, and also our people on board. So it helps us actually be very clear in communicating it to everybody else. So that's my spiel on strategy. I'm really interested in opening up to any questions about things. Has anyone seen a strategy process done really badly, or had seen a strategy that doesn't work? And please unmute yourself and ask a question or make a